which is the end part, comes from a lot of places. And nitrogen wants to hook up with oxygen, and it likes to stay by itself. It also likes to hook up with hydrogen and a whole bunch of other things. This is my chemistry gets weakness. Nitrate, nitrogen, then becomes nitrate. That's a chemical process. So nitrogen, where does nitrogen come from? If you, where did you think nitrogen comes from?
That gets into the river?
Yeah.
Just off of fertilizer runoff, like wastewater?
Yeah. Why does fertilizer have a lot of nitrogen in it?
It's something that helps plants around here grow.
Right. And so guys are out here, Farmer Joe is out here putting nitrogen-based fertilizer on his crops because he wants them to grow. Now, Farmer Joe sometimes really knows exactly how much nitrogen needs to go on his plants to make them grow. And sometimes Farmer Joe doesn't know, so he's guessing. And sometimes Farmer Joe puts on more nitrogen than his plants can take up. So where does that nitrogen go?
Into his wastewater and off into the river?
It goes into his soil and then it gets pushed into the river, right? So it's a process of too much nitrogen, too much of a good thing being put on the ground, and that good thing ends up in the river, and then that good thing becomes somebody's problem downstream, right? So there's other ways nitrogen comes into rivers. And I'll tell you a little story. I used to work at Lake Tahoe. Has anybody been to Lake Tahoe? Mm-hmm. It's huge. It's like, Lake Tahoe is huge. It's 500 square miles of surface. Just the lake alone, it's 500 square miles. Now 500 square miles is kind of this part of the valley. Nah, it's not that big. Okay. But because it's 12 miles by 26 miles. So that would be like this valley from here to Hotchkiss?
A little more, yeah.
Hotchkiss is 10 miles.
Yeah, so it's still, so it's 26 miles across and 12 miles this way. So that's a pretty big lake. So 500 square miles. The biggest source of nitrogen in Lake Tahoe comes from the sky. And the sky, this sounds really weird, but the biggest source of nitrogen from the sky is from automobiles. Automobiles emit NOx.
We talked about that with air
And it
pollution.
goes up in the atmosphere and it collects on a dust particle, let's say, or a snow particle, or a rain particle, or a raindrop, and it attaches. And that nitrogen attaches to that water molecule, or that dust molecule, or that snow molecule, and it falls on the lake. 500 square miles of it falls straight down on the lake. And then it becomes available nitrogen to the water. So the biggest source of nitrogen in that system is from the atmosphere and from pollution in San Francisco. Paonia Valley, biggest source of nitrogen. It's probably not cars and falling from the atmosphere, right? You probably nailed it. It's probably from people putting fertilizer on their fields and that putting more fertilizer than they need, and the nitrogen gets in and it's washed away by the water because the water picks it up and moves it.
Is there a way to measure that so you can maximize efficiency with nitrogen, like in your fertilizer? So you can maximize efficiency and not have a lot of runoff?
Yeah. So like golf courses. Golf courses are managed by grass farmers. We have orchards up here. So yes, there's people, and I don't do this, but there's people called agronomists. And agronomists are people that work with soil needs, and they're soil scientists. But agronomists work more on soils and plants, the relationships of soils and plants. And an agronomist would come in and do some soil testing to see how much nitrogen is in your soil to begin with, what type of soil you have, and then give you the type of plants you want to grow, and give you what they call an application rate. You probably need 20 tons per acre of nitrogen-based fertilizer for this plant base. They can do that. They're scientists, they can do that. And they do that by studying the plant, knowing about the plant you're raising. And they also they look at the soils that you have on your land. And you can guess, like when I do my yard, I guess. But if I was having to pay for fertilizer by the 100 tons and the price it costs, I'd be wanting to know if it's exactly the right amount or just enough. So you can have someone tell you the appropriate rate of nitrogen for the plant you're trying to grow. Now that costs money, and some farmers go, well, you know, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I know that if I put this amount, I'll get this amount of peaches or plums or whatever they're growing, grapes. They may be putting more than they need, or they may be getting it just right. But like all of us, we can learn, and if you use a little science, they might be able to narrow that down. And when that farmer will narrow that down is when the price of fertilizer gets really expensive. And it goes, gosh, if I could just cut my nitrogen bill down and still grow the same crop, I'll be excited. And that way the water quality guy gets excited, because then we don't have a nitrogen load in our river. And nitrogen's expensive to get out of water, you know, to treat it. And it really impacts lakes. Lakes are more affected by nitrogen than rivers are, because rivers moving by, it's the bigger impact. So your question about nitrogen is, what we as water managers, guys like me in hydrology, we're trying to make sure streams are in good quality. We'd say it's really important for us to work with this farmer up here to try and get his fertilization rate appropriate, so that we don't have too much of a good thing running in our river becoming a bad thing. If you're running a feedlot and you got a bunch of cows, or your dairy farm, and you got a bunch of animal waste piled up there, what you want to make sure is that that water that rains on that animal waste doesn't go down and get in your stream. You want to contain it. So guys like me worry about, what can we do on the land, the people that own the land and use it, what can we do working with them to keep the amount of nitrogen they've got where it belongs, either in their peach orchard or in their feedlot, and it doesn't get to leak out and they contain it. Because once it gets in the river, somebody downstream's got to deal with it.
Right.
And if it's too much, then the guy downstream has a problem, and it gets very expensive to fix that problem once it's in the lake. I go back to Lake Tahoe. Biggest problem in Lake Tahoe: too much nitrogen. Too much nitrogen allows phytoplankton to grow, little plants, algae, all these things. Little plants and algae all grow, and what happens when you have a lot of those? Water gets real murky, kind of greenish color. If you've ever been to Lake Tahoe, you can see 100 feet deep in it. You can be on a boat and you can see down 100 feet. You can see the bottom well over 100 feet below you, because it's water so clear and so devoid of algae and plankton and everything. You see forever. So nitrogen comes in and grows more of these plankton and algae. All of a sudden you can't see as far. Now, does nitrogen hurt you? Like when you drink water with high nitrogen loading, what do you think? What is it? Have you found out what it does to you as a human?
I've heard like if it gets an overly large amount of like nitrate in the water, it can cause health issues with small babies, but
Right.
blue baby syndrome or something.
I don't know about that, but that's more research than I've done. So anybody else doing a water quality?